November 17th, 22 edition of CED Office Hour Live. This is a show that is put on by the Community and Economic Development Team with that we commonly use the acronym CED um, through the Central State University Extension. The purpose of this show is to be in conversation. We want you to join in on a conversation. It's not a one sided presentation. And we talk about all things CED. But before we get into our topic today, I want to always, as I always do, kind of give the definition of community and economic development. You hear CED all of the time, right? And it's like diversity, it touches on everything. So, CED, community economic development work, looks at how we live, how we work, how we play, how we thrive, and how we navigate all of those spaces. Depending on a CED professional's area of expertise, you may work on the infrastructure side, which is affordable housing. It's building of common spaces, it's development of riverfronts, development of buildings, um, things of that nature, right? The physical infrastructure. The other end of that spectrum is the development of people. So helping people to be self-sufficient, more empowered, self-empowerment, professional development, workforce development, and all things that deal with that individual and quality of life issues, right? And then you have the part in between, which I say is the connector, and those are the businesses, the organizations, the entities that help connect all of that and help us to move and navigate through that whole CED or our whole ecosystem of our society. And as CED professionals, we are working with everybody in that spectrum, right? And then we look at it from a systematic standpoint and how can we plug and play in different aspects of that system to make impact, to make a difference, for things to sustain. Eric Ambrose and I, who make up the CED team at Central State University Extension, we always say we want to work ourselves out of a job. So we're working with people in groups so that they're empowered to take ownership and maintain ownership of their communities and continuously invest. And we're facilitators of that. We come back in on a new project to help them on their next venture. But we're not there to take over their neighborhood. We are augmenting the assets that are there and empowering the people to manage their own communities, right? So that's what we do, or businesses, or put them on track for self sufficiency. So today, I am very honored that Pastor Peter E. Matthews has joined us today. He is the senior pastor of McKinley United Methodist Church in Dayton, Ohio. But he is a native Cincinnatian, so we let Dayton borrow him. But whenever I get him back to Cincinnati, I love that. But in the meantime, over the years, he has been very active in the community and economic development space, not only here in Ohio, but on a global scale. And so I thought it would be interesting to bring him in because not only is he a thought leader and an innovator in this space, but he also has the knack to connect the local economy. And when you hear that saying, think globally but act locally, he is an epitome of that. So, with further ado, I'd like to introduce Pastor Peter E. Matthews. I almost said your nickname out of habit, but Pastor Matthews, I'll turn it over to you to kind of give us a history of how you got here. And let's start once you kind of give your background, then segue into the Global Village Initiative, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. Uh, she's one of six people left on the planet that can call me Petey without getting prayed for with an E instead of an A. We're just so thankful to kind of be in this space. I think born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. I was born in Bond Hill. I went to a pretty successful private school called the Seven Hills Independent School. My life from there, I went to Denison University, Princeton Theological Seminary. And from there, I got my second master's at the University of Geneva in Switzerland in international relations. I've done a lot of pastoring on the local level, but it always has struck me, particularly at this new assignment that I have, how important it is that we don't just read the Bible, but that we become the Word. There's a word for that in seminary called being incarnational. And to be incarnational means that we become one, not just with God, but also with the text, because we don't want to find ourselves stayed behind some very archaic rules and precepts and words that no one understands. But how do we become the embodiment of what we believe that God designed for the people that the Bible says they want to prepare a better life for? Not just in the here and after, but the right here and now. So one of the things that we've done at McKinley over the last 6 years is to recognize that, as Gustavo Gutierrez says, that the poor have their own voices. And how do we live into such a place where we unlock the voices of the poor and walk beside them and make today better in real time? So what does that mean? So when I guess what about 6 years ago, when I came to McKinley, McKinley had approximately 37 people on my first Sunday and about $1,800 in the bank. Currently, we have three very successful not-for-profit businesses, and we serve approximately about 35 to 3,800 people a year in the work that we do throughout those business models. And our worship has increased. Pre-COVID, we were worshiping close to 250. Now, like everyone else, we've had some recidivism. We're probably around 125 now, but our numbers globally relative to streaming, we see probably 35 to 5,000 views a week on our Facebook and YouTube, and another 7,000 on our DATV and our local public access. But directly to what you're saying is what we call a touchable kingdom. And what McKinley has done is recognize that there is an opportunity to create and generate hope in real time. And the way we've done that is we've now have two separate 501c3s. The first is the Dayton Equity Center. The Dayton Equity Center is our business approach to how we make the world better. We've adopted a school with the Dayton Public Schools. We can talk about that a little later. We work now with 10 African congregations. We could talk about that a little bit later. We also have a food security task force. And then we also have launched with Procter and Gamble their foray into second chance business opportunities. And we're currently now the only church in America that certifies people for forklift instruction. So in recognizing what the needs were in our particular locale, we said, here are the social business needs. Let's trust the people in the community. Let's trust some of the retired people at our church. And then let's begin now to trust the community to provide jobs for. In 1651, our census tract, the average per capita income for a family of four is $21,000. So the disposable income is not likely. So what we've got to do is train as what we call stewardship and remind the people to be good stewards of their time, their talent, and their treasure. Akin to doing that work in the community, we said, let's franchise hope. And now we've been tasked by our bishop. There are 1,100 United Methodist churches in the West Ohio area, 17 of which are historically African American. We're now partnered with 15 of those churches to teach those churches how do we do what we've already done. And we call that Global Village. And the Global Village helps recruit another generation of social entrepreneurs in concert with 11 HBCUs and Methodist Theological School of Ohio. The Global Village also takes people through building and financial audits across the state. And the last thing we do is we do large community events with our historic Anglo congregations. So, in those three organizations, we still remind ourselves that it takes a lot of work to keep the lights on in historically desert places, but we believe that it's worth it because the people are worth it. And so, when you talk about what does all that entail? We've now were a congregation of me and a part-time secretary. So now we have about 38 employees that are working full-time, kind of around the clock, to make sure that the people in West Dayton have a fair and decent opportunity to be human.
Now, one of the things that you talked about is expanding, right? And utilizing the talents of organizations and people there. Can you speak to some of the types of partnerships that you have cultivated over the last 6 years to help you get to the point where you are at today?
Yeah, so I think let's just start with the Dayton Equity Center, our local not-for-profit. Um, with the Dayton Equity Center, we have those four components that we talked about initially. And so we've adopted a local elementary school, Roosevelt Elementary School. And in adopting that school, we are working with Dayton Public Schools as a service provider. We take some of those money from being a service provider. We look to see the landscape and said, oh, we have an opportunity to be a voucher program where kids can receive Title I funds. So we do with that Title I funds and then grow our business from there. And as a result of that, we now partner with the Flight Academy where they get free basketball opportunities. They do some STEM opportunities. There's some art opportunities on top of all the churches that come around to support for volunteer staff in step with the people that come to support in any number of ways, like Shoes for the Shoeless and the Dayton Food Bank. Our new venture that we're asking you all to kind of help us out with when we're working with 10 African congregations. We've been working with them and helping them build their capacity. There is an organization that we helped start inside of our church called Ebenezer Healthcare Access. A Rwandan gentleman named Mukunzi came to me and says, Pastor, we have a vision of taking care of ourselves. Can you help us? So we converted 2 former Sunday school classrooms into their offices, gave them an initial grant, and now they serve approximately 500 persons, resettled persons a month, and they come inside with them and help them get access to all of their medical needs. We then provide a social component, so then it becomes a wraparound opportunity. So we helped stand up that business, and now it has a cross business because the work that we do with Procter and Gamble and how we solidify and get people forklift jobs. Now we've got to have training in Swahili. Now we've got to have training in Spanish because we've come alongside those companies. And so what we make sure that we do is what are the specific needs of the community, and then we ask those questions. One, we take an assessment of what the needs are. There are some initial, perhaps small funding that we could receive from our denomination. What are the inline servicing opportunities? And then we partner with other people to make sure that we become a wraparound service for that person and that organization. So if it's Dayton Public Schools, if it's Procter and Gamble, if it's the Dayton Food Bank, if it's Ebenezer Healthcare Access, there's an endless list of persons. If it's Fifth Third Bank, once we develop a business response, then we can begin to make sure that our hope is manageable in a way that doesn't burn out the pastor and all of the other associate directors. But it's very, very clear and very important that people talk about what's present to them as opposed to what's possible.
So with that,
Am I talking too much, Eric? I know it's not
no,
Sunday. I know it's
no,
not Sunday. I
No,
know it's not Sunday.
I'm just
no.
soaking it in.
Actually, you're not talking as much as I was anticipating.
No, I'm just trying
You,
to leave room for dialogue because I think what's important is people feel like what we've done in the fifth poorest city in America is impossible. It's not impossible, it just takes work. And we
exactly.
don't, we are hope filled people, but we're driven by metrics. So, it's very important that it's not magic by what's happened. It's a relentless staff who believes that they're making a difference and holding the stories of individuals whose lives that they've changed. And as a result, we want to get next to the next person.
So one of the things that some of the initiatives that we're working with in extension, in addition to what we've already discussed, that may be other ways to partner. James Keys is on here. He's with our Family and Consumer Sciences team, and they do diabetes awareness, smoking cessation, um, doing cooking classes on how to cook with healthy foods, from farm to table kind of things.
Uh huh.
But they also have recently got a health mobile unit.
Uh
So
huh.
when that might be a potential area to partner with the immigrant population when they're doing a outreach event to expand your capacity to get some of those health screenings and things like that accomplished.
But I but I
Another,
think but I think too. Let me cut you. I think too. What's important for us to consider is there are tons of people. Hernando de Soto in Peru. There are tons of different women who work along side of people in India. The same thing that happens in Peru and India and different places in South America and in Africa. There are a lot of people that do a lot of wonderful work outside of the legal tax structure.
mhm,
If we would just slow ourselves down and bring people in and help them build capacity, long term, it would be a win win for everybody. It's just not sexy. So I'm committed, we're committed. There are 10,000 people in Dayton that are African, that are resettled, and that's an economy, not just a social work opportunity. And
yes,
so we are heads first into that space, not only because we believe that there'll be great church members, but they also have people who are willing to latch on to what I think is the crown jewel of Methodism, which is social mobility.
and
So go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
No, so I'm saying if we can get, like last year, we got 20 kids free summer day camp opportunities. If in 5 years those kids now have an opportunity to be day camp counselors, I now have 12 colleges where those kids can go to. If those kids can go to college, then they have a greater chance of coming back. It's just not the sexy work that people want to fund. But what you guys are doing, what I find so exciting, empowering, and why I'm here on my vacation from Florida is that you guys are committed to doing the work and helping people build capacity, right?
Yes,
And the building of capacity, people organically find out that they've got what they need all along, right? Because
yeah,
we recognize that grants are leftover income, right? So let's
mhm,
just call it what it is. If we recognize that grants are leftover income, we never really look for grants that are not in line with our business plan because we don't want to get so skewed and so addicted and so hooked up and mess up the integrity of what we're trying to do. So if we say one school, 10,000 resettled people, people who need jobs, no one needs jobs more than people in West Dayton, and we continue to live, and I can say it, you can't say this, but I can say it, Amber, in a food apartheid, it's not a food desert, it's a food apartheid,
mhm,
then we then can kind of live in to help people build the necessities relative to what they need. Because what we've done now, we've had so much success. We also help and are developing a missional plan for a St. Paul United Methodist Church in East Dayton. Because what I found out that just like West Dayton feels like Haiti, our Anglo brothers and sisters in East Dayton, it looks like Bosnia Herzegovina.
Mhm.
And we want to make sure what are the measurable outcomes and what are the techniques that kind of set them free to do the work that they need to do too.
Awesome. And like you said, our sentiment is that as an extension as a whole, at Central State, we are focusing on, the micro enterprises, the small business development, and everything that we're doing so that it can be, as I said in the beginning, so it can be sustained beyond our direct involvement, right? We want to
Absolutely.
work ourselves out because they are empowered to do it all themselves and have the infrastructure to not only sustain but to grow. And then if
Right,
they're calling us back, it's because, hey, we got this new project or new idea. Now we need your help to infuse that next level.
right.
Um, and one of the things, and Eric is a subject matter expert in this area as well, is the ABCD model. So, Eric, can you briefly kind of go over that? Because I truly feel that that is how we operate so that the whole audience knows what that is.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I think it's in the name. So asset-based community development, ABCD. Uh, it's the starting point is the assets or the gifts of uh, a place or the people in that place, and building from that. It's a it's just a different paradigm than what we're thinking of, which is where the needs and um, what are the problems that we're trying to solve, but what are the gifts and assets that we can lift up and build a prosperous future for all on. So but something there's more to it as far as methodology and stuff, but that's the fundamental paradigm shift that we promote with ABCD.
So we're all aligned, basically. But I wanted to put that out there because we know traditionally when you have institutions come in and play or major corporate resources or things like that, um, you tend to want to be a dictator and say, I know what your problem is and I know how to solve it. We flip that and say, hey, we have this skill set, but we need to help you determine what your assets are. And then you tell us what your needs are. And then we say how we can potentially help. And the reason I say potentially, because they might not want that, right? But it's about what they want and need, not just what I think is the answer, right? And then force feeding what that answer is, right? And a lot of times when you have that kind of dictatorship type of approach or archaic approach, then it becomes a dictatorship and then the needs aren't met. People are disfranchised. And it can even lead to gentrification of whole neighborhoods, which has even happened down here, where it started out, the community was given ideas, but then other forms or places that be kind of took over the process and they lost their ownership of their own community and now they've been evicted out of the community. All those organizations that really got put into work and got things in motion are all gone, even individuals, right? And now it's a whole new landscape. And not only did they change the name of the neighborhood from Over the Rhine, even though it's still Over the Rhine, they just call it OTR now. So they've even rebranded the whole community to something totally different. And so with that ABCD model and just our commitment to giving voice to those who don't have a voice, giving the tools so that they can be empowered, they know how to even ask the resources, right? Additional resources, how to ask and not let someone else take over. Um, that's just how that's how we operate, and that's what's important. And it's amazing how that is still kind of a foreign thought process, and to us, it's just common sense. Like that's how else would you do that, right? So
I don't know if this is useful at all. I dropped a TED talk
yes,
in the chat, and I didn't realize it was going to be that. It takes up half the chat, but sorry about that. But this is Cormac Russell, who's deep into ABCD. He gives a great TED Talk, and his TED Talk, the title is "Building What's Strong, Not What's Wrong." So that kind of captures, I think, the spirit of what we're trying to get at.
No,
And Jay,
I think part and parcel to globalization is to recognize the value of a living wage job, and that persons there are forces at work, particularly from large companies, who have squeezed living wage employment out of a lot of our communities. And yet at the same time, we can't romanticize entrepreneurship as something other than a daily grind, that you have to have a set of values and be honest about your outcomes. I think what's so particularly inspiring about what Central State has unearthed is it can increase its foot presence for decades to come, not just in academic years, but by decades to come, because they are willing to both listen and learn aside of other communities. I think when we don't become seduced by entrepreneurial rhetoric that a lot of people like to put out as a way to take away from the fact that it's still up to government officials, it's still up to um, local city commissioners to find quality jobs for their constituents. We don't want to take the pressure or our foot off the neck of those persons. But at the same time, there are creative partnerships whereby people can produce pockets of hope, and those pockets can be brought to scale by the wonderful people at Central State or the Dayton Foundation or other places. But for me, it's not an either or, it's definitely a both and. And some of the things that have happened in Cincinnati was because we have people who have been seduced by their activism and not ready to become businessmen and businesswomen.
correct.
So we no longer have the opportunity in disenfranchised communities to be either or. You've got to be activist minded, and you've also got to know how to read a spreadsheet. You've got to be able to speak truth to power. And at the same time, you've got to be able to make sure your 990s are complete by the end of the year. You can't have it either way now. And, that's a tension that we don't talk about. And the spiritual side of that is, what are you doing to live into that space as a thought leader or as a practitioner and offer yourself up happy and whole and helping people move in the right direction, so your personal life is not a causality of the people that you're trying to help. I'm not saying that people can't be perfect. That's not what I'm saying at all. But you do have to kind of model a value system that will inspire people to live another day. Because it is hard as hell out here. It's hard as hell out here. 12,000 kids in the Dayton public school system are getting free and reduced lunch, right? We have kids that stuff sandwiches in their pockets because they want to share with their brothers and sisters. I'm not talking about Uganda. I'm talking about in Dayton. So, typically we have to find a way to kind of marry the sense of urgency in our institutions with the people that we serve. And I think that that's a step in that direction, because people are really not eating in Dayton. People really don't have jobs in Dayton. So when we marry that concern, it gives us a sense of urgency relative to take the filling out of those grant forms, the filling out of whatever needs to be done, takes it a lot more serious because we recognize that the stakes are higher. And so I applaud you all for the work that you're doing to kind of come along some of these people, to give them a sense of what are some of the basic skill sets, and also provide them with a pathway to kind of seek out their own liberation. Very important.
Did you
Go
have a
ahead, Eric.
comment,
Ask me a
Eric?
question. I'm tired of hearing Amber. You want to ask me a question?
Eric looked like he was going to ask the question, so that's why I was asking.
Well, and I don't know if anybody in the audience has one as well, but I'm curious about, I mean, I just am really deeply appreciative of the fact, I think the other dynamic that happens here is, you struck me when you talk about the, grants or leftover income. And so, um, I think the other thing that happens is we see a need like 12,000 kids, you know, on free and reduced lunch, or going to qualify for free lunch. And so many people then say, well, we got to do something, so let's do another, not that you aren't doing that, you're doing the food, but you have to ask the question, why is that the case? And so you guys are building solutions, upstream solutions, and not just trying to meet a downstream issue and put a band-aid on a situation, but you're asking that question. I think that's really critical. I wonder how, I'd be curious about how else you would see potential partnerships. Amber had brought up the, James's work in the the health education sector. Is there anything else that comes to mind with what we do and how we could partner? And I'm thinking about entrepreneurship with the 10 African congregations, for example, or something like that.
I think immediately you all could come in and do a program audit of what we already offer and think about how do we begin to scale that to 10 different African congregations. I have lunch every fourth Tuesday with 10 African pastors, and we begin to kind of talk that. We did this year, we've gotten a couple of dollars to start in January to do some capacity building within their congregation. So that's a building audit, that's a financial audit, that's a program audit, and how do we help them build the scale? I think that's important. I think the other thing that's important too is to begin to think about adopting a school and what are the wraparound possibilities for the school that we serve. And we could take a bite size of 50 kids or 75 kids at a particular school, and what are the wraparound services that are needed. We help fund and expand a local African American owned tax company. And as a part of me giving him our business, he's got to do free taxes for all of the kids in my after school program and their parents. So what are the ways we help those things build capacity? And then we show that as a model for how things can get done in other places relative to building to scale. And this is important. I think this is inherently African, but I think it's very important. We party, like we celebrate milestones. We remind people. We just started something at our church last month, 2 months ago. Every fourth Sunday, we have something called Rising Roosevelt, and whoever the student of the month is, they get a certificate at the church, and their parents get a free dinner, right? We take them out to like the Pine Club or whatever. So the first time that we did that, the mayor was happened to be speaking that Sunday at the church. That kid took off running, and he jumped in my arms to get that certificate and to take a picture with the mayor. And I was crying uncontrollably. The mayor was crying, because those are the moments that his father will never forget, that this 7-year-old is being affirmed. So what we can no longer assume is make the presumption that people have those kin connectionships with churches and YMCAs and Boys and Girls Clubs. The dislocation of Black and brown and poor white people from charitable organizations over the last 30 years, you can no longer take those relationships for granted anymore. So I think what would be wonderful is you guys come and say, hey, let's do a program audit about how we scale what the Dayton Equity Center is doing. So we're not touching 4,000 people, we're touching 10,000 people. And then once we get those in place, not a moment too soon, we begin to articulate that narrative out, so that narrative provides ripples of hope for other HBCUs to work with their local not-for-profits as to how to get it done.
Beautiful. Amber, it sounds like you've got some scheduling to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No,
Yeah. Actually, I'll be up there on Tuesday. So yeah,
and
Freddie
I
is
think,
putting me to work.
and I think that we don't undervalue nor do we undersell that hope is a real currency.
Yeah.
When I've traveled to India, when I've traveled to Africa, when I've traveled to different places, we have manipulated and prostituted hope so much in the American political system that when it's offered up in a way that's authentic, we don't recognize it. But what's important for us all to be mindful of is we will not only be integrous and offer up best business practice and be transparent and let people have internal or external audits, but we cannot undervalue how meaningful transparency is as a currency. Hope is as a currency. You know what I mean? Patience is, consistency is. Those are not just values that we hold in as individuals who are doing the work, but those are currencies to the service model, to the people that we provide, right? So, my church knows that I might cuss them out or they might see the pastor with a cigar, but they also know that they can exactly know where I'm coming from and have a clear understanding of, wow, not only does he love me, but he is providing me a roadmap that I can be in to walk with my God faithfully and have a sense of liberation and independence. So for me, who's my stepfather was the head maintenance man at Children's Hospital for 38 years. Head maintenance man for 38 years. And he worked so many hours that when he died, the people at Children's Hospital gave my mother his regular check every 2 weeks for 2.5 years. That's how much overtime he worked, right, Eric? So for me, it's to be committed to doing the work that I've been called and provided to do. And if we live into that commitment, it's unbelievable. Today, I got an email right before I jumped on. The reason I was late today, right before I jumped on, I had a professor say, I never heard this professor. Pastor Matthews, I've heard about all the great things that you're doing. We are doing brand management and strategic planning and branding in our class and graphic design. Can we help you? We've heard great things about you. I was like, heck yeah, hurry up, let's start. Don't wait the second semester, right? This conversation that we're having, like Amber will tell you, here's how the Dayton Equity Center got really kickstarted. And I shouldn't tell this, but I'll get in trouble. I was in a public spat with the former mayor of Dayton because there was not enough COVID testing coming into West Dayton fast enough. So we were in a spat. So I got tired of hearing what we couldn't do. So I started cold calling companies until we finally got one that partnered with us in 20 congregations around West Dayton. We tested 2,500 people. From there, my bishop asked me to do a 6-month interim somewhere. We then went to Grace around the corner and did another 15,000 vaccinations. As I was doing that, I wasn't getting paid. The 2 teenagers I was working with wasn't getting paid. We literally started getting money from all over the world. Just all over the world, people started helping us because we were committed to doing the right things. And as a result, we then said, what are the business practices to be mindful of so we're never begging for anything again? So the church that was about to close 2 weeks ago, Tim Ryan was there, and we were in the New York Times. Somebody wrote us a check for $50,000 because they said we heard you guys had some problems in your building. This is not for the program. This is to make sure you guys have a new roof. So that's kind of the faith side of what we've been called to do. It doesn't take away from the hardcore business practice that I have. And I've got a lot of church people now at our church currently that says he's turned this place into a business, right? It's not a church anymore. He's turned it into a business. Well, there are 2 light bulbs that are out in my office, Eric. And I look at those light bulbs every day to remind me until everything else is fixed in this building, I won't get those light bulbs fixed. So I think the faith side of it says that nothing seems impossible. But the other side of me that's integrated with my faith says that we better wake up and act like it's up to us to get it done.
So this goes back, and James reiterated in the chat that he loves speaking what's present versus what's possible. And that's the perfect example of that, right?
Right.
To make sure that you are staying those 2 light bulbs, outside of prayer and the faith walk, right? That's physically saying, okay, we still got work to do, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then if I'm total business, when we totally running at the capacity of our business, right? Then them light bulbs are gonna be fixed. Right.
And and I think, I think what we and I think this is black, brown, poor, white. We have been so obsessed with waiting for other people to do for us what we can do for ourselves. We've missed the alliances socially, religiously, and politically because we've been pulled apart by outside forces. And I think what this with this kind of bare bones approach to faith-based entrepreneurship does is remind people who wants to tell who in their right mind, regardless of their color, is going to say no to help me with these babies. Who's going to say no to help me getting somebody a job? Who's going to say no to help me helping somebody, giving them food and food security or getting them a job? These are transferable ideals that meet the hearts and needs of everyday people, regardless of your color. And so, as a result of that, Eric and Mr. Ambrose, what's happened now is we've got 2 of my 4 associate pastors are Anglo. I've got a white drummer. I've got a Hispanic guitar player. My keyboardist is from Japan. That in this historic space, we've now created something more global because we've got people emphatically wanting to help now, right? Now, it doesn't go fast enough. I'm crazy. I'm always screaming at people and I'm on vacation. But, other than that,
Oh, you're rubbing it in.
yeah.
We up here with snow flurries.
No. This is only for Amber, y'all. This is only for Amber. But I think that's important. And I'll say this, I got about 6 minutes, Amber. I said it before I close. I am in therapy. So every Thursday at 3:00, I get on my therapist's couch because I also need not only a conversation with God, but also a conversation with someone else to make sure I stay in my right mind. So I say that to anyone else that's doing this community economic development work, that it's very important to make sure that you are in constant alignment and working on your psychosis because you'll get burned out sooner rather than later. I wanted
That
to
is
add that
so
in
true.
there too, because Ambrose looks crazy. He looked crazy. He like he need to talk to somebody.
Well, I probably do. Um,
Questions?
and so,
Got any questions? I think
but
Monique has got her hand
Monique
up.
has a question,
oh
and,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
Monique
then we'll
has
Yes, I
a
go to
hand.
do.
Ambrose and then James.
Thank you so much for inviting us to participate in this, Amber. It's wonderful, and we appreciate the work Brother Peter's doing all over the world. But I have a question for him.
Yes,
In
ma'am.
your ministry overseas, are you working within the Methodist churches there in, say, Africa, or are you, or wherever you go, India, wherever? Are you working within that system of people you
So,
build the
yeah.
capacity of, or you feed, or is it the Muslim community also, or you know, are
So I
they all Christians?
so I have a doctoral group that goes with me to the World Council of Churches in Switzerland, where I did my study. But currently, my full fledged partnership is with the Methodist Church in the Congo. And for 3 weeks every year, we go to the Democratic Republic of the Congo and talk about the development of capacity building with about 700 pastors there who meet for their annual conference. So 10% of the entire United Methodist Church can be found in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So that's where I'm currently doing my international work.
Okay, thank you.
I think Extension definitely needs to be in that mix.
Yes.
Thank you, Miss Monique. Brother James, you had a question, sir?
I did. Thank you very much, Pastor. First thing I was going to say, I love that when you say Amber's the only one that could be prayed on with an E versus an A. That was good. I got it. My question, you said that there are alliances that are missed because we have been pulled apart by outside influences. Is that what I heard? Right?
Correct.
Okay. Can you go a little bit deeper on that? What do you mean by
Well,
we
I
missed the
think
alliances?
I think that when people have asked me on more than one occasion to run for political office, the first question they ask me is not what I believe in, is but how much money I can raise.
Hmm.
And so we have to be honest about the political system that people are in it to win first before they're in to serve a particular constituency. And when that thing gets uh, shrunk down on its lowest level, we will see groups of people who are vying for the same resources fighting each other as opposed to sitting at the table figuring out how they can do the work together. I think that happens all the time in politics.
Mm-hmm.
Cooler heads never prevail, right? So what I'm offering is, as opposed to a Baptist group, a Southern Baptist group, or an AME group fighting over land, what are the possibilities that we pull our resources together, figure out what's in it for both of us, and both go to a Republican congressman or both go to a Democratic congressman, as opposed to horse trading and stepping and pulling us apart.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah,
Yep.
I see that with the work I do in family consumer science. I think
Oh,
because I
absolutely.
do that, and then you have healthcare systems doing it, you have health departments doing it, and I am literally trying to say, hey, look, let's all come to the table, and let's all come together and see how can we work together. We can probably hit more people that way
Right.
versus and build
Ab-
more trust that way as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Very well
Mhm.
said, sir. Thank you
Yeah.
for that question.
Thank you so much. Mhm.
Yeah. Brother Ambrose.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for sharing with us today. This has been very enriching and motivating, and I think that we probably need to have a few sessions where those of us who are just focused in the community and economic development area, that we sit down and sort of talk with you, maybe at length, just to sort of build that foundation in terms of our purpose, even more, and get that strength that's needed to do that work. So,
I would love,
thank you.
let's put Amber in charge of it. Amber's going to invite y'all. I'll have food waiting for y'all, but let's plan a tour
Because
of
I
our
was going to ask you,
facility.
are we going to have food?
Let's have a tour of our facility,
Okay.
and then we can just sit down and kind of brainstorm together. I bet you my team would love that. Amber, let's make sure it happens before Christmas.
Okay. I will do that.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? James, you got something?
Include me. Include me. I know Ambrose say CED, but how about some FCS? Include me. I'm local.
Okay.
I'm right here, so
And he's in Dayton.
Okay.
I'm in Dayton. So, you see my Northmont shirt on.
We're inclusive. We say CED, but we're inclusive. We welcome all.
I appreciate you. All right. I'm good.
There you go, Ambrose, breaking apart the alliances already.
Well, Pastor, I thank
Uh,
you for spending time on your vacation, rubbing it in with that beautiful landscape. And as always, look forward to continuing working with you and bringing some stuff up to scale. So I will see you next week when I come up there, and then I'll schedule a time for our whole team to come as well. But thank you again, and I will make sure that when I send out this video, once it's going to be edited and put on our YouTube channel, which is the Central State University Extension YouTube channel. Um, I will also make sure all the attendees have your website for the Dayton Equity Center, because you really could have probably spent another 20 minutes just on the awesome work that is being done through that center, and just even the story of how a lot of the things and the support you got before it even physically got to be, right? So just want to thank you again for joining us. You're welcome back anytime on any subject, which is anything up under CED. So
well, I think the last thing too is um, for you all to think about, for you all and your team. Part of my dissertation is on adaptable reuse, and that um, part of what we need to be mindful of in the CED community is that developers don't always have the last word, right? That we've got buildings, we've got structure, we've got spaces that can be reimagined for the purposes of equity and liberation. We've just got to kind of recognize that. I say to people all the time, and I'll leave you with this. If you guys went to Walmart tonight and you got to Walmart and you walked up there and you walked into Walmart at the door and you couldn't get the door open and it says closed, only open 11 to 2 on Sunday, you would be furious. You'd be like, what a waste of space, right? If that Walmart was only open for 2 hours on Sunday. So we've got to have the same mindset in the CED community, that there are these historic buildings, there are churches and schools that have multiple uses if we would just open our eyes to see it. So I look forward to seeing y'all real soon.
okay,
Bless.
thank you,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Everyone else, for the last couple minutes, um, you know that every 10 years, the U.S. does a census of people, right? But every 5 years, they the USDA does a census of farmers. And this is the year is currently going on. And with our work across the board, no matter what team, and working with the small farm operations, and working with the growing sector of the urban farms, we are finding that a lot of the farmers that we have identified have not received the link from the USDA to, or whoever's managing the census, to be counted. And so Ambrose and Eric and I are looking into ways that we can help get people, on organizations and co-ops, and to participate in that census. And the direct thing is, the more farms that are registered, that is part of the formula that determines how much our extension gets funding for. And the more funding we have, that means the more resources that can be put back directly to assisting those farmers that we're targeting to serve anyway. So it's a win-win situation for those that get participate in that census. Um, because a lot of these urban farmers don't have a farm number, right? They don't know about it. So they didn't get the online version. And that part they probably can't participate in now, but they can participate in filling it out manually. And I'll turn it over to Ambrose to give us some updates on that.
So what I did, there's a couple links that I went ahead and put in the chat. Um, the the process that they use for the Census of Agriculture is that you have to register, and then the deadline to register was in June, the end of June, and then they will send out the form to you, to the farmer, in to be turned in November and December, with the deadline being in February. So at this point, we're past the timeline to get registered or added to their system, where you will be able to receive the form, and have the ability to either mail or do it online. At this point, it would have to be a manual process. I just spoke this afternoon, prior to this session, spoke with the regional office of the USDA statistics office that is doing the Census of Agriculture for our region, and they've indicated to me that what they would need to receive are the names and addresses of farmers, and then they will mail those census forms directly to them to be returned to be counted. And so I've prepared, we put together the first link is a Google, a Microsoft Forms that we'll start sending around, so folks can complete the form by providing their name and address, and then we will compile a list, and periodically, like each week, send that list to the regional office so that they can get those census forms out. And then farmers, the urban farmers and others, rural and urban, will be able to respond to that. So that's sort of the process. So we're gonna try to facilitate this manual count of additional folks who have been missed in the past.
Are there any questions or comments?
Ambrose, in your conversations with them, like, I mean, well, so what we have to think about is, what are they? Is the definition of farmers not necessarily someone who has a farm number, but somebody who is growing something to make money? Is that the only requirement, or are there other requirements?
There is one of the links is also to the was for one of the infographics, but their definition is a farm that it can be rural or urban, that produces or normally produces $1,000 in revenue per year. So it's not, they don't restrict it to farm numbers and things of that nature.
Okay, 1,000.
So, yes.
Okay.
On an annual basis.
On an annual basis, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so at this point, I mean, I'm sure that some of the folks that we've engaged with over this year, even over this past 12 months, fall within that category, and they probably know of some others who we haven't spoken with yet who do. So what we're trying to do is just to get folks into the system so that they can be counted.
Right.
And we'll also share the information and reach out to A&R, our Ag and Natural Resource team, because they may be doing some things in that area, but everyone that we've spoken with so far about ask the question, no one has participated, no one, and they didn't even know about it, the Census of Agriculture.
Right.
So
Even we didn't know about it. We just kind of stumbled across because of somebody said something, and we went online and started researching it. So this is something that has a direct impact for the next 5 years on the resources that we can offer the people and the businesses that we're targeting.
Right. So I think
Okay.
that we'll just start circulating. So if there's no questions, from the folks who are online here today, we'll just start circulating. We'll put together, an email that we can just start sending around, and I'm sure we have some active folks who can then distribute from there.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
So once again, I wanted to say thank you for everybody for joining us today for CED Office Hour Live. This concludes our segment today on spiritual entrepreneurship and also giving an update on the farm census. And we'll start putting out more information about that to educate people and to encourage people to participate in that census. But without further ado, thank you for joining us. We will not, due to the holiday, we will not have a segment next week. We will reconvene at the end of this month. So in 2 weeks, we'll see you guys. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.